So what I wanted to cover here is how I approached embellishing my Chrome Loop scene. Okay, so what I wanted to do first is kind of go over, I made a braided cable that was in there, and so I kind of wanted to go over how I made that braided cable. Alright, so what I have is my Chrome Loop from the top, and I've just got it open here so I can see scale, and then I'm just going to create a spline, and this is going to be the length of my cable, so I'm going to make it fairly long because I want it to be able to kind of twist and come through the scene. Now I can kind of stretch it in some later, but I want to get it pretty close, and so that's pretty close to what we need right there. And to a certain degree, it doesn't matter which viewport that you create it in, because eventually we're going to have it move to a control spline, so it doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead and we'll just call this braided cable. And let's just isolate it. Alright, so one of the things I want to do is I need extra points on this line because I'm going to want to bend it. So right now I just have 2 points, one end at the other. So what you can do is come in here and put a normalized spline on this. This is the modifier that allows to control how many vertices are on the line in its lengthways. So you want to click on this button to turn on the knots so we can actually see the vertices in here, and then I can come in here and I can do a knot count, and I can start putting how many I want in here, and I'm going to put quite a few. I think I'm going to put 200 in here. Okay, so the next thing we can do is we can turn this spline into a renderable spline. To do that, go back down to line here, and if you click this button, show end result, then it'll show you those vertices on there. And then we can click in here, enable in viewport, and enable render. So we're going to do that, and really I don't even need enable render on, just enable in the viewport. Okay, so now we can adjust to how thick we want this to be and how many sides that we want. And I think for what I have, this is going to work great. The thickness, I think, is working good. That will be a good cable size to run through there. And eventually what I'm going to do is to subdivide this to smooth it a little bit more. So for what we have right now, this works good. Let's go back, isolate it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to go ahead and we can convert it to an editable poly. So what we're going to do is we can just put an edit poly modifier on this, and it'll turn into a polygon. Now I really don't want the ends to this. Okay, so we don't want these caps at the end, which it puts on there by default. So we're just going to go ahead and pick the caps and delete them off of there. Don't need those. Alright, this looks pretty good. Now we're going to have 2 parts to this cable. There's going to be the inside part and the outside part. So we're going to make this the braided cable, and then we're just going to right click, we're going to clone this, and we want it to be a copy, not an instance. And we're going to say this is the braided cable. This is the rubber. So this is going to be like a rubber interior to the cable. So the cable will be rubber on the inside and then metal on the outside. That's kind of what we're doing. So now we have 2 cables in here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put those on their own layers so it's easy for me to find them. Here we go. And for right now, let's just go in here, and I'm going to make a new tab. Let's get a couple materials in here, and we're just going to use some defaults in here for right now. So I'm going to go for the metal. let's just use a copper as a start off. I'm going to tweak that probably later. And so we'll just call this braided copper. And then this one's going to be our interior. And for that one, we're just going to go with a default rubber. And so we'll call this cable rubber. Okay, so what do I have picked here? I have the cable rubber, so let's assign that. And then the braided cable, we'll assign this to it. So now we have those materials in there. Okay, so now for the braided cable, what we're going to do is we're going to add a twist modifier to this. And this will allow us to twist the cable. So when we start twisting it, you may get some weird things because we got to figure out what axis it's on. Okay, and so you'll get a weird stretch when we add some angle onto this, and that'll let you easily say, okay, that's the wrong directions, and there's the direction we want. Okay, so now as I give it numbers, I'm twisting this cable, and we can keep twisting it until we finally decide that it's enough twist for what we want. And this is kind of just, you have to kind of just eyeball this yourself as to how much you want to twist it till you get to an angle that you like. And I think that's working pretty good for me right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put an edit poly modifier on this. And then I'm going to go to edge, and I'm going to pick one of these edges, and I'm going to loop that. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is we want all of these, but we don't want these cross sections. Okay, so what we want to do is to pick these and loop them until we have all of these picked. Okay, now a good way to do that initially, let's go to the top view, is to come in here and you can drag across like this and loop. Okay, so what we don't want to do is we don't want these cross sections, we don't want these pieces. So that'll get us all the stuff that we are wanting. Okay, now before we go to this next part, we need to come in here and set something. So I'm going to make another line here real quick. And what we're going to do now is set the parameters of what we want these little bitty wires to be. And so this is way too big. So we're going to want this to come down. And I think on our sides, we want maybe 4. And so what we're setting is how thick we want that little piece of wire to be. So maybe something like that would work. So now we go back to here. Now what we're going to do is convert this to a spline. So to do that, all you have to do is go right up here. There's a button that's create shape. When I click on this, it's going to take all of those edges that I have, and it's going to create a spline from that. Okay, and it's going to use the properties that I set for this one. So now we're going to go over here and turn off braided cable, and then we're going to pick the spline, and then we're going to make this one braided cable wires. And if I can spell braided. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now eventually what's going to happen is we're going to put a mesh smooth on this. Okay, but since this is a spline right now, what I want to do is I want to turn down some of these cross sections that are in here, and this is formed by our interpolation in here. So right here, interpolation, we can start turning this down, and it's turning down how many subdivisions are going through this, and probably 2 maybe. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror this. So we have the braided cables all go in one direction, but now we want them to come back the other direction. So I'm going to go up here and click on my mirror function, and then I'm going to tell it to make a copy, and then it's going to make a copy of it going back the other way. Now yours might default to clone, which is just going to say flip it the other direction, but we want to make a copy, so it leaves our original one and it makes a copy. Okay, now that's going to give me two cables over here, so I'm just going to pick the original one and then hit attach and pick the other, and then it'll attach them all together as one thing. So the way this will look later is we're going to end up putting a turbo smooth, mesh smooth, doesn't really matter which one you use, and it'll smooth this and make them into little cables. Yay! Now later, if I need to, I can come back and I can actually put a push on this if I want to make the cables thicker or thinner, and that's all a possibility. So for right now, I don't want to put the turbo smooth on it. I want it without the turbo smooth. Okay, now if we turn back on our rubber part, so now we've got, let's go at the end down here. And you'll see there's the rubber part too. So eventually what's going to happen is on this spline, like we said, we're going to have a turbo smooth on it, and then you'll be able to see that rubber in there between. Okay. So the easiest thing to do, there's a couple ways this can be done, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and attach these. Okay, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and save this out. And we're just going to call this cable. And then I'm going to grab the rubber, but go ahead and just convert that to a poly and attach, and then attach the cable to it. Now it's going to ask you some questions here, and you're just going to leave it on match material to the material IDs, and that way it won't change the materials that are on here. They'll be the materials that I had before. And so now there's my braided cable. Now eventually I'm going to put that mesh smooth back on, but for right now this is fine. Okay, so we're going to end our isolation. So we can kind of just go ahead and move this off. I don't need this little piece anymore. I just made that for measurement. Now what I want to do is draw a spline of where I want this cable going through here. So I'm going to have it going off of the edge over here, and then maybe coming through like here, and then coming through and maybe going off, something like that. And so for this line, I'm going to go to the vertices. I'm going to pick all of the vertices, and I'm going to turn these to smooth from Bezier, so they just kind of have a smooth transition from one place to the other. I can come back and use Beziers later if I need to. And so what I want to do also is I'm going to need to move this up And I need to move it up so that this cable lays flat on the ground. So I can just guess for right now, and I don't need that to be renderable. So I'm going to say something like this. We can move it again later. Alright, so I need to deselect that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make this go down that line. To do that, we're going to go to our Create tab. And what we're going to do is go to, actually what I want to do is go to our Modify panel. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a Path Deform. Now, there's two path deforms in here. There's one down here which is an object level path deform, and I would say don't use this one. The one we want's up here in our world space modifiers, and we want the path deform up here, path deform WSM. But the reason we want to use this one, it will automatically allow us to move the cable to our spline. Alright, so once I have this on here, then I have to pick the path. The path is this line that I drew that I want it to go down. So I go in here, I pick path, and I create it. And then I click this button, Move to Path. Now the trick is to do kind of like we were working earlier on the other pieces, to figure out which direction it needs to go. So once you pick the right direction, you'll see it start to go down that path. And now what it's going to do is follow the path. Now I have a %, which is how far down the path it needs to go. I also have a stretch, and I have a rotation, and I have a twist. So if it's not twisted enough for me, I can twist it more. If it's not long enough or it's too long, I can use a stretch. And of course I can use a rotation, which just causes it to rotate, which really for us is not that big of a deal. Okay, so then you want to go to your camera, and then you can see the cable going through there. Now, if I want to move the cable, okay, so I want the cable to be in a different direction, I move the original line that it's on because it's got construction history on this. So as I move this line, so if I grab this point, and I'm going to go to a perspective view. So as I move this line, you'll see that it will go with it. So I can always come back here and readjust it to make it do what I want it to do. I can put extra points on there too if I need to do that. Okay. Now I can do other things, like if the cable's not thick enough, I can put a push modifier on this. And then the push modifier will allow me to push it out. Okay. And then you might want to be doing the push based on a specific selection. Okay. So when I'm pushing right now, it's pushing everything out together as one thing. Okay. But what I might want to do is say, okay, I'm going to pick the rubber, and then I can invert that selection, and then with it selected I can put a push modifier on it, and I need to turn off that path for right now. And then as I push it, it's going to make the cable thicker. Okay, so that's an option of something you can do. And for right now, I think what I'm going to do is, I don't think the cable's thick enough, so I'm going to go back to the original cable, go to its edit poly, make sure I have everything picked, and then I'm going to scale it And now that's, to me, a little bit better of what I want. I want the whole cable to maybe, where it's at, it's probably okay. I might adjust that later. Okay. And so then I just need my smooth on it. And there we go. And that's how to make the cable and how to modify the cable. So you can always come back in and use a push if we want the thickness of the wires to be thicker or thinner. I think way I have mine right now are okay. So I'm kind of happy with that. Now, sometimes you can get some pinching. Can you see how this is changing here? And what's causing that is my original spline. So if we go back to this original cable that they're on, is that the tension between this is different. So the tension between these two and those are different. So if you put a normalized spline on this, we can turn our knots back on, then what it's doing is creating a tension that's the same on all of them. And I can always come back in here, put an edit spline in here, and I can come back in here and I can still move the pieces around. Okay. So now go back to my cable and turn it back on, and now you'll see that I don't get that pinching in there, because what it's done is created the same tension all the way along the spline, so that I don't get that kind of tension that was happening in there before. And I can do other things too to this spline. I've got everything is smooth right now, but if I wanted to, there was some kind of movement that I needed, I can always turn this into a Bezier, and then I have my Bezier corners that I can do. But you do get a thing where you can end up stretching the piece, so you just have to be careful with that. I have a tendency just to leave everything with smooth, and then if I need more, then I just add some more points in there. And that's braided cable 101. So this is an extra assignment. You don't have to do this. This is not going to help your grade in any way. It's just a learning exercise to be able to enhance your piece if you so have a desire to want to make your piece to the level of the one that I placed in there. Okay, hope this helped you in how to make a braided cable. Thank you.